Good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to host this extraordinary GA, General Assembly of Volt Europa, on this sunny Saturday morning, and I'm very happy you're tuning in today. At today's GA, we will vote on an amendment of our statutes, and so this part will be very short and quick. However, to use the occasion of us all coming together, Rainier will give an insightful update on everything that is going on in Volt Europa and on the ground in our local teams. We will together host a discussion round with our national presidents. Our General Secretary Anouk will explain how our newly implemented integrity system will function. Volt Austria is going to tell you why the Austrian elections in autumn this year are particularly important for Volt. And I will give you a political outlook at the very end. So stay with us until 1 o'clock. There is plenty going on. Now I would like to introduce to you our fantastic chairing committee with our chair, Thor Lahorn from Denmark, our co-chair, Katharina Raduns from Germany, and our second co-chair, Giulia Romana Mele from Italy. The three of them will guide you through the legal part of our GA today, so listen up. And I will now hand over to Thor so we can start. Thank you, Thor, Katharina, and Giulia, for your time and commitment and to make this GA today possible.
Thank you, Valerie. As you mentioned, I am Thor. I will be your GA chair today. With me, I've got Katharina and Giulia, who will both be taking questions, comments, and reading them out loud. We do have a single vote today. This is about the country council, and we, of course, will be taking questions and comments for the debate parts, but we will not have extensive questions on country council as we had that at the ordinary GA. The vote will open within seconds, but first I would like to introduce Katharina and Giulia. Katharina?
Thank you, Thor and Valerie, both of you, for this nice introduction and starting our GA today. I'm Katharina. I'm from our team in Munich, and I've already had the pleasure to be part of this team for our last GA. And yes, essentially I'll be doing the same this time. I'm going to be supporting Thor and Giulia in chairing this GA. And I'll try my best together with Giulia to make sure your comments and questions are being read out and addressed to the right person. So please feel free, keep them coming. We're looking forward to a very lively debate. Have fun.
Thank you, Katharina. Giulia, would you like to briefly introduce yourself?
Yes, good morning. So as Katharina said, we will be supporting today Thor in reading out your questions. And I'm, of course, very happy to be back for this extraordinary GA. And I hope it can be as fun as it was the last night.
Thank you, Giulia. With that, we'll move to the formal parts of the extraordinary GA, and that is to say the General Assembly has been opened and the vote itself has been opened. You can find your individual Tusker voting link in your email, and if you click on that, you'll get to your voting page where you can see the Country Council revision vote. Questions and comments can also be submitted from there, and you can also support our fundraiser. I will hand it back to Valerie and Rainier for an update on the organization and the way forward based on feedback. Valerie?
Thank you, Thor. I will be giving that update, and thank you all for being here, and welcome to this extraordinary GA. It is a beautiful sunny day, and I'm happy that you are choosing to spend that day being here with us at the extraordinary GA. The last GA was an important milestone for Volt. We took important steps on and laid the foundation that we can build on the following years. And this is not where it stops. Actually, it's the beginning of where we start using the foundation that we've laid. So we will make sure that the narrative we chose and the mission statements are translated into all different languages. We will make sure that the strategy we voted on, the vision and the strategic objectives, will actually be implemented by the strategy implementation team through workshops with functional teams, with country boards, and eventually also with local teams. We've also gotten feedback on some of the content of the things that was presented. For example, the values and the fact that they need to be given more substance. And that is our intention to work on as well in the coming months, to make sure that the HR team actually uses the values we voted for, to give them more substance and make sure that everybody is internally aware of those values and is actively using them. We will build on what we have done. And one of those things is the policy framework and policy process. The policy process is now open. So if you have an idea about a policy that you would like to present and push forward, then please contact the policy leads. And the first vote on new policies will be on September 5. And I'm super happy to see how the things that led up to the last GA are now actively being used and how that will help us in the future. We also asked for feedback on the GA itself. And we had this extensive survey, and there's some highlights about that I would like to share with you today. So first of all, on the 2nd of May, we had roughly 3,000 viewers. On the 3rd, 1,500. The participating members that voted were 837 in total. And we've got asked 148 questions during the live event and 7 extra questions in the survey. We made sure that all these questions are addressed. There's 67 comments that were shared during the live event and 11 comments to appreciate the success of the first online GA. But the most feedback we've gotten with a distance, besides appreciation for this online GA, was the fact that we needed a better way of voting. That's why we will appoint a voting task force that will make sure that in the future, voting procedures are more clear, vote counting is more clear, and that it will be easier for our members to vote on the things they can vote for. And this is to tell you, I also want to tell you that all this feedback and all the answers we got to our survey will be sent to you on Monday with an email with the result of the vote that we have at this extraordinary GA. And you can read the answers to all the questions, and you will get a summary of what is discussed here. So you can be certain that we are taking those feedback signals seriously and we're using them to improve. So while we as an organization mature, progress, and become more serious, the problems we are trying to solve are growing with us as well. Climate change is only getting worse, and social inequality is only getting worse. We see that the problems are growing as well, and therefore the necessity of Volt is getting even bigger by the day, especially in times of Corona. And while I will not go in depth about that because Valerie will do that more later today, what I want to say is that in times of crisis, putting time and energy in working for an organization that thinks about what our society should be like is also very interesting. And sometimes people ask me like, okay, what's the coolest thing about being the co-president of Volt? And for me, the coolest thing at the moment, especially in the last month, is seeing everything that's going on in all the countries that we're active in and seeing how volunteers are together trying to make the world a better place. And because that's the coolest thing for me, I thought, okay, if I'm going to give this speech, I'm going to try and give you a sense of what that is like. The thing is, though, we have so many countries and so many things going on. And one of the first rules about speeching is that you shouldn't just state in a sort of repetitive way what's going on, because that can become really boring. But still, I want to try that. So the challenge for me today is to do that and without making it boring. I once got taught that the most precious gift you can give someone is the gift of your time and attention. So I'm asking for some of your attention now. First of all, let's talk a bit about Volt Italy. So Volt Italy has voted for an Italian vision that complements Volt Europa's vision. And aims to answer many questions on positioning on difficult topics that they continuously receive. And they are developing a more coherent electoral program for local elections. They are almost certain to run in elections in Tuscany, and polls are putting us in a good place there. And for the first time, we have a real chance of electing someone, probably in Veneto, where discussions for a coalition with progressive parties are ongoing. And Volt Italy is preparing to run in the biggest cities in 2020, like Turin, Milan, and Rome. They're also aiming to enlarge on traditional media, and the first result of that was an op-ed published on L'Inchiesta Europea. It was written by Andy Shehu, the co-president of Volt Italy. And Volt Italy will have a big online GA on the 4th of July, and we'll have another one in Florence in September, leading up to the elections that will take place in September 19 and September 20th. They also are promoting an initiative which is called the Road to 50%, to make sure that we get to a stage where we have 50% of women as elected representatives in our society. That's just something about what's going on in Volt Italy. But at the same time, in the UK, we have a member, Alexandra, who is with a group of lawyers and UK nationals that care deeply about the rights of EU citizenship. They have launched an ambitious court case to protect EU citizenship. This case is brought to the European Court of Justice in Luxembourg, and they argue that even if the UK withdraws from the EU, the fundamental rights of UK citizens as citizens of the European Union cannot be removed without their consent. And this court case highlights that the EU is not only a political union or a union of values, but also a union of citizens. And I sincerely hope that Alexandra, Volt UK, and the others that are pushing this court case will be successful. At the same time, in Bulgaria, we are certain that there was electoral fraud in the last local elections. And that can frustrate me deeply. It makes me angry. The fact that within Europe, democracy is not a given, and that the rule of law and democracy is not always upheld. And that's why I'm happy that Nastimir Anieniev, our country lead in Bulgaria, always has good concrete ideas on how to tackle problems. So at the next national election in Bulgaria, which will probably be in March next year, we want to make sure that international observers from different countries come to check and make sure that the democratic procedure of voting is actually done in a proper way. I thought of a name. I think Guardians of Democracy is the name I would give those people that as an international observer go there. And what we want to do is get 50 people from 10 different countries from Volt, train them on how they should observe during elections, and have that team of Guardians of Democracy and let them go to Bulgaria at the elections next year. So if you're interested in being a Guardian of Democracy, please reach out to Nastimir Anieniev, and you'll probably hear more about it when it's closer to the elections. Meanwhile, in Germany, Volt will run in 9 cities and communes in the biggest state or province of Germany, which is North Rhine-Westphalia. The elections will take place on September the 13th, and the biggest team is running in Cologne with, for the first time in Germany, a woman, for Volt Germany, a woman as first candidate. And that is Jennifer Glashagen, and I'm very happy that we now have a female first candidate. So in Cologne, Düsseldorf, Paderborn, we're running also as mayor candidates. So if you are a team close to the border of North Rhine-Westphalia, please visit them in the first weeks of September and help out with the local elections. I did that a while back in the Hamburg election, and it was a lot of fun, and it can really make a difference. So if you feel like it, put in your agenda beginning of September, visit North Rhine-Westphalia and help out with the elections. At the same time, in the Netherlands, Volt is stronger than ever before. It's more professional, bigger, financially stable, there's more local teams. It is really going in the right direction. And since last Saturday, we have elected the top 6 for the national elections next year. Laurens Dasse, whom you might know because he was the previous country lead, is the lead candidate. And next to him is Nilüfer Gundogan, who you might also know because she was on the list of the European Parliament elections last year as well. And she gave a really cool speech in Rome at the GA. And they, together with the top 6 that now has been chosen, will make sure that we will win seats at the national elections in the Netherlands next year. And that makes me happy. I am very confident, almost certain that we will get seats there, because we need 0.7% to get elected in parliament, and we had almost 2% at the last elections, and we're stronger and better than we were before, so we will make it. And if you see how the Netherlands, as part of the Frugal Four, is blocking change and positive steps towards a better Europe, then it's extra good that we will bring a European perspective to the Dutch national politics. This week, I also had the pleasure to talk with country leads and volunteers from Czech Republic, from Slovakia, Poland, Hungary. And I think almost everybody knows here, because we're still in the startup phase, that what it's like in the beginning to be part of a new local team or a new country. It takes an entrepreneurial spirit, a pioneering mindset. And the beginning is always the hardest, because you're trying to do something and create something that hasn't been done yet. And this pioneering is especially hard if your country has an entirely different political situation and a shorter history of democracy. So I applaud these people for trying to push Volt in their countries. And what you may also know, if you have been part of the beginning of a new city or local team or country team, is that one person can really make a difference. So my request to you is, if you know people in Hungary, in Slovakia, in Poland, in the Czech Republic, please let the expansion team know and bring them in touch with each other, because those few people can make the difference and can really get the ball rolling in those countries. So you can always reach out to our expansion leads, Friedrich Jeske, Ksenia Ivanova, or Mara van der Klubbe, who's also working specifically on this region. At the same time, there's so much going on. It's amazing. Like in France, we've had participated in the local elections. There's a very steady growth. In Romania, we filed to become a legal entity, but we got rejected for reasons that were absurd, and we're trying to contest that. In Spain, there's a new Catalan electoral program for the next election that has recently been approved, and there's a policy on rural depopulation that they will bring forward. So much is going on. And another thing is Austria. Vienna elections in October. This is a super important and crucial moment, not only for Volt Austria, but I think also for Volt Europe as a whole. That is why they will get the opportunity to, at the end of this GA, talk to you about why this is important, what this moment will bring us, and how you can help. So you can imagine that it's a challenge to give you all these updates without it getting boring. And there's an even better way to always be updated by these things. And that's the European report. So in the European report on a monthly basis, you can read up on all these things and know what's going on within our organization. They have now also made a monthly event that you can participate in, where there's first half an hour presentation about what's going on, and then half an hour or longer, if you like, of socializing afterwards and being able to talk with the people that are responsible for various projects. So this is just an update from some of the countries, and I didn't even touch on all of them. But we're also the first political party to be active on Discord, a new social media community platform, and we now have reached over 2,000 people in our community there. But at the same time, the COVI survey, we've gotten almost 4,000 respondents to our survey, which is an amazing result. This was a combination of not only the Conference on the Future of Europe campaign, but also the European Citizens Initiative and Volt's way of doing politics. It's cool to see how these three projects build on each other. The European Citizens Initiative, people are bringing forward a lot of ideas. Bianca and Raoul are overseeing the process, and the deadline has been postponed until the 30th of June. So you still have time to push forward your idea about what our European Citizens Initiative should be. And Francesco Risi Brignoli, who is now the lead of the Conference on the Future of Europe campaign, can tell you a lot of interesting stories about how the brightest minds are coming with ideas to develop social innovation. So reach out to him if you want. I am reaching an end, but I still want to highlight the expansion team. They are launching an initiative of twin cities and partnerships to make a European network of cities and people across border to strengthen the internal cohesion. And we have gotten feedback about how we as an organization are not diverse enough. And that is entirely true. And especially in light of the recent events with discrimination and institutionalized racism, which has again opened my eyes because I'm also a white privileged male. And the conversation I had with Volt member Gilberto Mauricio that was also posted online, for me was an eye-opener on what we should try and do to fight institutionalized racism. And therefore, I am strengthened in the thought that we should put our emphasis on also making ourselves more diverse. Diversity was already part of our 7 strategic objectives that we voted on and that we created together as a movement. But now we are taking active measures to increase our diversity. We have we want to start with diversity representatives and create active measures to increase our diversity. One of them is also an initiative for reaching out to more non-academic people and create a community for them within Volt. So all of that is going on. We're implementing our strategy by having workshops in countries and teams. But there's one last thing that I want to end with, and that is, what can we expect from each other? What should we expect from each other? Sometimes I notice in myself that I have unrealistic expectations about the processes that we have in place, about the developments and the speed of development and of the maturity and the time that people and teams can spend on projects. And what I notice in Volt is that often the weight of projects comes on the shoulders of a few volunteers. And I want to remind you, we're still a startup. Mistakes will be made. We have made them, I have made them, and we will continue to make mistakes. Don't get me wrong, it is good that we are expecting some quality, that we're reaching a new stage where we even demand quality. But we need to keep in mind that we are a startup and that we are doing this as volunteers. So try to remain constructive, assume good faith, and make sure that we create a fun and welcoming environment for everyone. That we don't just bring forward problems, but also solutions and offer to work on bringing those solutions to life. Because as our mission statement says, only a Europe that acts together can solve our shared challenges. And I think this is exactly how we lead by example to foster a federal and united Europe. Sorry for this way too long speech, but I wanted to give you an impression of how cool it is to see everything that's going on in our organization. Thank you for listening and have fun today.
Thank you, Rainier, for that update on the organization. As you all have seen, the vote has been open since 11 o'clock. It's going to end at 1 o'clock. There were some questions about supporting documents. We have added a link on your personal voting page to supporting documents. And to further explain what we're voting about today, I would like to introduce Leonard Everveen, our General Secretary. Leonard, can you explain a bit?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much. And also thank you, Rainier, for the words you just spoke. They're very relevant and very true. As Vote Europa, we are a startup, a political startup, but still a startup. There is no role model for us to follow in Europe. We're trying to do something new. This concept of a pan-European party, of one organization that is the same in every country that we run in, doesn't exist. And we have to constantly develop, constantly evolve, and learn from ourselves. And this is what we are in the process of doing with the vote today. Today, we are voting to formalize the role of the country leads of the national boards that were elected by their members on a national level, on the European level. The country council is the body where the national teams, as well as the European board, will come together to communicate and to coordinate. I want to quickly explain what we did until today, because of course this is not new. This is an organizational need we had from the very beginning. But until today, we used something, an interim body that we called the Volt Country Representation, the VCR. It was always interestingly called, and nobody really knew what it meant. This was the place where the national teams came together to discuss, align, but it was never really mentioned in our statutes themselves. So it was always just this informal body. Today, we want to change that. In the statutes that were created for our new legal form last year, we have this concept of the country council. But unfortunately, until today, the national leads are not supposed to be part of it. It was a bit of a different concept that we thought of in the very beginning. But now we've recognized that we need to actually come together with the national boards. And in this new country council, in those statutes, with the amendments today, we want to allow national boards to be part of it. To recap, the country council has the primary purpose to coordinate between the teams themselves, so between the national teams and between the European level and the country boards. So it's really about finding one line, coordinating and acting as one organization. In addition to that, it's also a very important communication medium, forum, where the national boards can be approached by the European functional teams. It's the place where all the people that are involved in a lot of the national operations are present. So it's just very efficient to approach them as a team with a new initiative that is important all over Europe. One change that we're making is that we're bringing gender balance into the representation in the country council. So all the national teams will have 2 gender alternate representatives. They're flexible in who these people are, but in the most cases, they will be the elected board members. And yes, they have to make their decisions together, because together they represent their national team. There are a couple of formal legal competencies that we had to assign with the country to the country council, which are 3 things. First of all, discuss political alliances, as we said, to act as one organization. Second, adopt new member organizations. It's a bit of a non-issue, but you need this approval mechanism. And then lastly, to convene a General Assembly, which is a legal safety net if ever the European Board cannot call a General Assembly, but we made sure to raise the threshold to be able to do that to a 2/3 majority. So this all sounds a bit boring, and there are a couple of quick facts, quick clarifications that in response to a lot of questions we got that I also want to give you. First of all national teams have the same right to vote. There's no differentiation between associated or other member organizations, all of this. Everybody has the same right to vote. There's no country-specific veto. This means we are not replicating the mistakes of the European Union. And then lastly, the representatives of the country council are the board members. So these board members are democratically elected. We're not losing democratic legitimacy with this body. It's not going to make operational decisions for our organization, but as we said in the very beginning, it is primarily for coordination and communication. So I would like to encourage all of you to read through the supporting documents, even though this topic may seem a bit dry, but it's a very important step in the development of our organization. With that being said, I encourage all of you to participate in the voting today. Thank you very much and enjoy our General Assembly.
And thank you very much, Lennart, for the great introduction to the vote that we're having today. I believe we had very big support for the Country Council vote at the GA. Of course, we need to confirm it today that we still have that support. And as part of the EGA, we also have a debate that's going to happen for the next hour or so. This debate will be moderated first by Rainier and then by Valerie. And before we hand it over to Rainier, I would like to again introduce Julia and Katarina, who will be taking questions and comments and presenting them on your behalf. You have all received a voting comment form where you are welcome to submit comments. But first, Katarina, would you like to just briefly say hi and also mention something about the comments?
Yes, hi again, everyone. We've already quite busy in the background and we're looking forward to receiving your comments and questions. I've just got a few general remarks about that ones. A lot of you asked about the supporting documents that have been mentioned in the vote. Thor has already taken that one up. We've edited it itself, and there is also a message in Tusker where you can find the link to that supporting document. So thank you for bringing this one up. Other than this, so far we've had one particular comment which I liked a lot, so I would like to read that one out. It's from Yanko in Spain, and he says, "Really awesome speech, Rainier. Great to get such a rich overview on all Walt's projects." I think that one is nice and worth mentioning because we should be calling each other out on all the stuff that is maybe not going so well, but in particular also complimenting each other on the stuff that is going well. So thank you for that comment, Janko. In general, from now on, we will try to get some supporting pro or dissenting con statements on the various debate statements that are being presented now. And we'll then pick the ones that fit into that particular slot. So please try to focus on commenting the debate as of now. Thank you.
Thank you, Katarina. I think we will open the debate very quickly by going back to Rainier, who will be moderating the first statement debate. Rainier?
Thank you, Thor, and thank you, Katarina, and also thank you for the compliment. That makes me happy. So we have gotten often questions about transparency and the way we try to balance, as is one of our strategic objectives. We want to balance participation and leadership, but how far does that go? And there's also a trade-off with transparency and efficiency sometimes, transparency and confidentiality. And that is something I sometimes struggle with and that I notice people have a lot of varying opinions about. So that's also why after a talk with what's now still called the VCR, but will hopefully be changed to the Country Council, we decided to talk about some statements that are along the lines of that struggle. And the first statement, the first debate we'll have here is about the meetings we have. So the statement is, every meeting of the European Board, VCR, and soon to be called Country Council, and the country boards should be recorded and posted on Workplace. So within Volt, we have a lot of meetings, a lot of calls, sometimes too many. And in those meetings, we take important decisions. And those are taken by the European Board on the European level, by the VCR, which will be the Country Council today. I'm repeating myself, but also on the European and national level, we coordinate there. Each decision is made with the intention to improve and move forward as a political party and a movement. This means that the decisions, they are taken on behalf of our movement and with the interest of both. And sometimes that raises the question, how open should these meetings be? And we've had this discussion in the VCR before. We're now going to have it here on the stage. There are reasons you could say that recording the meeting is the right way to do it, but you could also say that it's not. On the one hand, you can say, well, we have elected representatives. They need to be trusted. We gave them our vote, and they should just do the right thing on our behalf. On the other hand, you could argue that the decisions that that concern our movement and individuals and teams, they should be able to hear what is being discussed and what contemplations there are and what reasons there are for doing certain things. So there's various sides to this, and I'm very happy that we're going to debate about this. We're not only going to debate about it here on stage, but if you get the email on Monday with the result of the vote and the recap of what we've done here today, you will also get a link to a small survey where you can give your opinion on this statement, so we get an indication of what our movement thinks is right. And that will help us and guide us in the future. That is not a decision or anything, but it's an indication of what we as a movement want and expect from leadership. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce the first one who is going to argue, and he is for it. And that is Michael Holtz. Michael, could you first, in one sentence, introduce yourself, where you're from, what your role is in Volt, and then explain why you are for it?
Yes, so can you hear and see me? Yeah. Okay, nice. So hello everyone, my name is Mike, and I'm the male co-president of Volt in Sweden. I want to argue pro now for more transparency. And you know, when I was approaching the pro side, which by the way is not easy to argue, I thought more like, okay, what is it that disturbs me in transparency, instead of where is transparency beneficial? And now I know that Leonard explained already earlier that, you know, the country council or the VCR as of now, you know, that there's no specific, you know, veto rights and things like this. But however, I still see a certain parallel between the VCR and the European Council in the European Union. This is like how it is composed. It is composed from the representatives of the national chapters. And I believe that what we can achieve with by publish some recordings from these, specifically the VCR or the country council meetings, is that we are kind of have a preventive measure that that prevents like a certain disenfranchisement from our members. You know, that whenever you come to make a decision, then it is very important that this decision then is motivated in the end, clearly motivated. However, this might not always be possible. So there must be a mechanism for members to reconstruct how the decision body came to a certain decision. And this would, of course, be very easy, you know, if they could just like listen to a recording, or if they could like read a transcription of the meeting minutes or something like this. So by the way, I'm assuming that recording is not only sound and video. I also include transcription of minutes as a record. And then maybe quickly how we handle this stuff in Sweden. So in the Swedish statutes, we actually have written down that every member of Volt Sweden is allowed to take part in the board meetings. They are completely public to all of our members at any time. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Interesting to know more about the Swedish situation, how you are handling it, and why you are pro. The next one who will argue against this is Paul Looper.
Hi, thank you very much for having me here. And I would like to argue against this, this statement. And I think in order to do that, we have to be precise, right? Because this statement basically says that we should publish all recordings of board meetings, VCR meetings on the European level and board meetings on the national level. And I think there's certain arguments to make about this. So the first one is, do we already have a practice of some organization that did that? And in Germany, we have the example of the German Pirate Party, and they actually had recordings of everything online. And it basically led to an atmosphere in the organization that people didn't know how to interact with that. It started a lot of fights, internal fights, and the Pirates were really known for being an organization where there were fights and intrigues all the time. And I think that is to some degree a result of how they were working with transparency. Because I think there are two sides to transparency, and the first side is actually the structure of transparency. Because for me, transparency is not about simply publishing all information and putting it out there and then waiting for people to interact with it. But transparency is about explaining, about making accessible, and about giving people the right information and the information that they need. And by simply just recording everything and then making everything public, you don't do that. But you just leave people with 1 hour of video where they have to find the important parts of information. And therefore, I think transparency is not only about just publishing, but it's about finding out what is important in a meeting. And therefore, I think it's a much better way to take the transcript, then do a summary, and then summarize the parts of a meeting that are important for people that are not in that specific body, because it gives you better access to the important information. So I think that's the first one. But I think there is also a second argument to be made, and that's about trust. And I think that democracy only works to a certain degree when there is trust and control. And let's talk about trust. In these meetings that we're having in terms of leadership meetings, for example, in a board meeting, you're working very hard to get a lot of trust from the members of your board. But trust is also very much related to talking openly to each other. Now, when you make public and record every board meeting, then you create a situation where you're actually not talking to the 8 people in that room or in that meeting, but you're talking, in the case of Germany, to 2,700 members and volunteers potentially. And you talk completely different, just on how you try to explain things, when you talk to 2,700 people than when you talk to 1 person or to 8 persons in a room. And I think in order to have good decisions, you need to be able to talk in an atmosphere that is a lot about trust and understanding that can only be created through a lot of one-on-one talks, relationship building with people in that meeting. And that is something that you can't guarantee for 2,700 people. So all of a sudden you say something that the person might understand much, much differently than you when you know that person and when you have a relationship. And therefore, I think that publishing everything makes it harder to talk in a trustful situation and a trustful atmosphere. And that can lead to more misunderstanding and actually less transparency in an organization. Because if this atmosphere of trust doesn't exist in a completely published call, then naturally people will try to find other fora in which they talk about these issues. And then you have a layer of transparency, but it's actually just superficial transparency that will move to other fora. And therefore, because of the Pirates being an example where this kind of transparency didn't work, Second of all, that just publishing everything is not real transparency, but it needs to be reduced. And thirdly, because you really need those situations and atmospheres of trust in your leadership teams, I would argue strongly against making everything, publishing everything and recording everything and giving that out to everyone in the movement.
Thank you very much, Paul. So it can actually lead to less transparency or a fake perception of transparency in your view. Next, to argue here for publishing all recordings is Anka.
And I am sorry, Rainier, but Anka is currently not on. If you need another pro statement, then perhaps Michael can give another pro statement briefly.
Yes, I can give another pro statement. So I believe that if we have a large degree of transparency, it can actually lead to an improved discussion culture. So Paul talked a lot about trust and building up trust, in smaller groups, but also, when you are aware that, okay, this might be recorded and that like a larger part of the movement, might have the ability to see this, then it is true that you are, you're behaving differently when you talk, because you are aware that you are observed, or you're aware that you are possibly observed. There's contra arguments for this, no doubt, and they are all valid. But there's also a pro argument, which is that maybe it forces us to, to talk a little bit more benevolent, to be a little bit more kind to each other, or to show a little bit, or simply to take a little bit more effort in understanding other positions before, before like speaking rude or harsh to each other, simply because of the fact that this might be seen by other people, by a lot of other people. So this is in short another pro argument that is building on Paul's contra argument of trust again.
Interesting, Michael. So actually that those extra eyes could lead to an improved discussion culture where people, maybe due to social control, are even more kind and take more effort to understand the opinion of others. Thank you for being flexible also in coming back and filling the place of Anka. Then the next one who will argue against it is Daniel. And don't forget to briefly introduce yourself, where you're from, what your role is involved, and then dive in.
Hello, Europe. I'm Daniel. I'm the co-president of Volt Luxembourg. And I'm here to give you some arguments against us recording everything. So as Rainier mentioned before, there's a very important thing at Volt that we might have overseen in the past months, and that is maybe the work-life balance or work-Volt balance. We are all invested pretty much in the movements. We all take plenty of time to give energy to Volt. But just to reassess a little bit how the situation already is now, the VCR meetings, the country council meetings, as they will be renamed, already provides a full agenda and also a full notes of with the transcript of what was decided, what was discussed, and so it's already, in my position, transparent enough. Adding videos for everything, for me, would not be a practical and concise way to share information. We already, many of us spend plenty of time at Volt, and I do believe that now I'm able to read 3 board meetings in maybe 1 hour. If I have to go and watch 3 hours of videos, of course, that's not as time efficient. Then, as already Paul mentioned before, we are an elected body. So I do believe that people put the trust in us. And if they do not trust us, in the end, it's their decision to remove us from that position. And so having a video transcript of it won't, in my opinion, add, as Michael said, another way of talking. I have not perceived any time that we have shouted at each other, that we have not been casual to each other. I do believe that it is a very nice way to connect together and to see each other. And one last important thing that I would like to mention is also that the minutes that we get out are all read by the people that were in the meeting. So if someone disagrees with the statement that he made, or how the way it's written there, he can always amend that, and that's not an issue. So for the moment, I do believe that we have quite enough transparency by providing notes in a concise way, where all the decisions and all the statements that were made there are provided. So that is my comment.
Thank you very much, Daniel. It's more practical and concise to have the agenda and the notes, which is already also transparent enough. It's interesting to hear that these different arguments that are all very valid, and it's, for me, again, fun to hear how different you can look at such a statement. I know that probably people at home are already responding and filing questions or remarks. So I would like to move to Katerina and Julia and see if they have a question for one of the speakers or a remark they would like to share with us.
Thank you very much. Yes, indeed, we have received a couple of comments that we are going to read. These are both comments that are contrary to the statement made. The first one is about data privacy, and it reads, in case the statement is accepted, how are you going to handle the issue of data protection and the need to ask for consent for recordings? And what about the internal technical security? So my take here is that he is asking about how you're going to process the data that you record. So how are you going to handle consent? How are you going to store all the data? If it is going to be secure enough, or the technical implementations that are going to be in place for this? I will leave the floor to you.
Thank you, Julia. Michael, would you like to respond to that question?
Well, yes, I mean, obviously the data protection is a very serious issue here. So, I mean, but I cannot speak so much about this in detail because I'm not a professional cybersecurity guy. So I don't know how this would be handled also from a data protection point of view. But obviously, what we are going to need, and this is because I said it is not easy to be on either side here, on pro or con, because we need to be, I mean, if we want to do something, we need to find some middle ground. But obviously, we need to treat it very differently if it concerns some private information. And this is maybe, I can talk maybe a bit how it is in Sweden, in the country, in the state of Sweden. So in Sweden's basic law, it stands that every person, every citizen, not only citizen, I mean also, I mean basically every person on the entire world, on the entire planet. So you, Rainier, you could now go to any, to any state authority and ask them, okay, how, where did you spend your money on, or something. You can ask them any questions if it is about state authorities, and then they are obliged to give you this information, unless it is unless it is protected by a certain secrecy law, like very private information or something. But the transparency here in Sweden is very high. But in the end, if we talk about data protection, I mean, it depends on where this data lies, and if this data lies on a Google server, then yeah, this is, I mean, more sensitive, I suppose. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Michael.
Yes.
I believe
you're
that
welcome.
Paul would like to respond. So let's go to response from Paul first, and then maybe we have another question or comment from Katarina and Julia. Paul, first to you.
Yeah, and I think there's another thing that is very important here. If you publish recordings and videos of every meeting, you also have the problem that our organization is so open that information leaks, also of how we behave strategically, how we might behave in terms to other parties, other opponents. And that is something that you can't save from getting outside of the organization. So maybe you remember when we took our decision on which faction to join in the European Parliament, our decision was already published in the internet by the Liberal Party, for example, before it was published. And just if everybody gets the information in the organization, then it's also sometimes hard to make sure that it doesn't go outside of the organization. And what I also want to stress is the fact that if you want to know anything about how was money spent in Volt or in Volt Germany, for example, or Volt Europa, or you want to know something about the decision, you can always get the transcripts and always the exact meeting of when such a decision was taken and why it was taken. So there is already that form of written transparency. I just don't think that it's a good idea to, make that a video transparency as well.
Thanks, Paul. Yes, I remember indeed that even Guy Verhofstadt spread our internal documents about that on Twitter, which was a weird surprise to say the least. Julia, do you have another question or remark? Or Katarina?
I will have one. Yes, thank you. We've actually received a second statement concerning the ongoing debate. This one is from Rosa Tafala in Spain, and it's also a con statement. And she says, "I was convinced for, but you convinced me, because you can hide the truth in a pile of useless information." So, job well done. She's against it now.
That is hide the truth in a pile of useless information. That is actually very beautifully said. I think that we are also nearing the end of our debate regarding this topic, and that we will move on to a next statement that Valerie will host that debate. So perhaps there is a final statement that somebody wants to give before I wrap up the debate. Julia, do you have another comment or question perhaps that you'd like to share from the audience?
No, unfortunately not, Rainier. There are no other comments. Oh yeah,
Okay.
Just one just came in. So just give me a second to read it because it's a bit long. And it says, so it is from Otmar Edinger from Volt, Romania. And it says, regarding broadcasted live to European national board meetings, for me it would be very important to see actually how our elected representatives behave and which arguments they bring in live, not only words written down. I would like to see much more details so that I can decide much better in the next election whom to vote again or not. Risk of leaking is not a counter-argument because also agendas and minutes can be leaked.
Thank you very much. Interesting. So it's important to know how people behave in board meetings, because that way you can better make a decision in the next board election. Paul has a final comment, I think, and I see Katarina raised her hand as well. So maybe let's go to Katarina, then shortly to Paul, and then I'll wrap up.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So guys, obviously there's a couple of statements coming in right now. So general remark first, it would be awesome if you could put on your statements as early as possible so that we don't end the debate while you're actually still taking part in the discussion. All right, so we've received one comment from Wolf Christen in Germany, and it's a bro statement. He says, although I see what Paul is putting on the table, I support full transparency. And Michael's statement, I would also like to be able to check into every board meeting when I'm interested and get full unfiltered information. Do not be too fearful about spreading information. And that's just what I want to comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Katerina. I saw that while you were talking, also Michael said, and I think that he would like to give a final remark, and I think it's fair to give both sides a final remark. Paul, Michael, then I'll wrap up. Paul, the floor is yours.
Yeah, first of all, I would just like to remember everyone that transparency is about making information accessible. So if you are interested about making information accessible also to others, then come up forward, be proactive, and help your board to publish information more accessible to everyone. I think there's always a way for us to improve that. And we can only improve that if there are people helping us. And for example, in Germany, we've got a board assistant that does an amazing job, Johannes Weigel, at actually helping us to communicate more transparently with our member base. And, this job is so meaningful for our organization. And if you want to do that, just step forward and help us to get better at sharing information.
Thank you, Paul. And always good to end with an empowering statement to get people to become active and be part of the solution. Michael?
Yes, thanks. I want to quickly react to what Ottmar wrote as a comment. I totally understand why he says that he wants to see the actual people as well, because I believe that Dan Silva's earlier statement saying that a video does not transport more information than within minutes is wrong. A video does transport more information, and this is body language. You see how the people move while they are talking. You see whether or not they are genuine when they talk and about what they say. So there is additional information that is coming with the video. And this is also why I believe that it is creating more trust to the people you have actually elected. And in that sense, I am not surprised at all that Ottmar would say that he wants to see the people he has voted for. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Michael. So I must say this is very interesting. It's and for me also typical how we have debates about certain topics within Volt, because you see how people come from different perspectives, different background, different cultures, that they have a different idea even you can about what transparency is. So to give a small recap, we've had as a pro statement that the VCR can be like the European Council, and we argue that the European Council is too intransparent. So we don't want to recreate that problems that have been part of the EU. And it's important that you want to reconstruct how decisions were made instead of only seeing the end results. Where Paul said, actually, transparency and opening everything up can lead to fake transparency. We've seen other parties where that led to more fights and intrigues, and it can move to different fora, or you can, as the comment came from the audience, hide important information in a giant pile of useless information. At the same time, we should trust the ones we have elected, and that was countered with the fact that it can also lead to improved debate and improved decision making and a more kind effort to listen and really find out what the other arguments are and how they reflect on your. Then came in and said that actually the agenda and the notes is already transparent enough, and you want it to be practical and concise. There's data privacy elements that make it hard. Where do you store this? Is there a danger of leaking? And I would personally like to add to that, we sometimes discuss very personal information, confidential things that come to us that really reflects on personal situations of individual members. And I think that individual privacy is more important in this case than total transparency, especially when it comes to complaints, conflicts, and personal situations. So it's super interesting. There's a lot of pros and cons. We want, as an organization, to be as transparent as possible within our circumstances. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So it's important that we are transparent enough. And if you think we aren't, please, as Paul said, try to become part of the solution so that we are more transparent. Thanks everybody for participating in the debate. I see we're 5 minutes over time, so sorry for not sticking to the schedule enough to the organizers, and I wish you all a pleasant day. Let's move on to the second statement and the second debate.
Thanks, Rainier. It's actually good you're running late because I had a really loud church bells going on. So, hi everyone. So we will now get into our second debate with our country leads, which will be interesting as well. And it will be on the statement, all complaints that are brought forward to the conflict resolution body or anywhere within Volt should be shared with members as soon as they are received. So I want to give a little bit of background to that. Debate and discussion are fundamental for our political organization like Volt to thrive. So acting together is needed just as much to achieve our shared purpose of a more fair, just, and sustainable European society. While most of the time our communication and action will do no harm, there will be times when conflicts will arise and words or actions, whether intentionally or not, will harm or hurt others. So as an organization, we will develop over time an improved, shared understanding of how we want to behave and how not, as well as how we want to communicate and how not. For us as team leads in Volt, it will be unavoidable that people will turn to us and entrust us with their concerns or complaints regarding the behavior of other team members. They will expect that we act and do what's right. But how do we deal with conflict, complaints, and concerns of our members? How transparent or confidential should complaints be handled? And how do we treat someone who is accused of misconduct? So let's dive into this complex topic of handling conflict and hear the positions of our national representatives, voicing their perspective on the statement, all complaints that are brought forward to the conflict resolution body or anywhere within Volt should be shared with members as soon as they are received. So as a first pro argument, we will have Marcella from Belgium.
Yes, good morning, Valerie, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share with you my ideas. So conflict resolution is really a complex issue, and there are always different kind of perspectives of parties that are involved in any kind of potential conflict that we might have in the party. And as you said, there will be conflicts coming, in interpersonal conflicts, and we will have to be able to solve them in an open manner, and we will have to initiate a dialogue. I think dialogue is the most important thing to start with, and to bring a conversation and to find some solution should be the first step before anybody goes to seek for help from the conflict resolution body. But of course, conflict resolution body should create a very safe environment for the people that will be involved in any kind of conflicts. So transparency, in my view, is and in our view, of course, it's our political value that we should safeguard. We have been talking about it already during our European elections, where we talked about this in our Amsterdam Declaration. So rightly so, because Volt aspires to lead by example and calls for transparency when it comes to politics, to our political representatives. So we want them to be apply the same kind of culture within Volt. When it comes to our internal party politics, we need to be also accountable and be very transparent, especially when it comes to conflicts. So we have to abide by our values, and we have to encourage to be honest and transparent. And in case there is any kind of conflict, And when it would come to breach of our common values, those values must be protected, and especially the integrity. So while when it comes to the confidentiality, it is quite tricky, because you inhibit accountability, and accountability has to occur towards someone, and confidentiality is really a particular case. So confidentiality will allow people, for instance, to continue with unwanted behavior. And we would need really a different mechanism how to deal with this. So for that reason, we need that conversations, and especially when it comes to different kind of conflicts, need to be shared and transparent, so that all parties involved are sure that nothing is being hidden, and that those that are deciding about anything that is happening in that conflict, that are neutral, and they are taking a decision which is in a neutral and transparent manner, so that all our members can be able to really check what was going on and to see how this potential conflict was dealt with. So I would just give maybe also an example when it comes to confidentiality, where this would be very important to keep things confidential when it comes, for instance, to some harassment or violence. I can give example of domestic violence. When a woman has any kind of problem like this, we need to make sure that in this case, the confidentiality would be crucial. So I would really advocate for more transparency and sharing information towards our members, so that our members have the right for all the information that is necessary in order to create their own opinion on the matter.
Thank you, Marcella. So Marcella thinks that all complaints should be handled transparently and should be made public straight away to the entire movement, which is interesting. And I think probably one of our con arguments will go into the integrity of the person that also a complaint will regard. So that will be interesting to analyze. So Daniel Silva from Luxembourg will be next on stage.
To answer here is, should we reveal it as soon as it's sent? And there is where I see the con arguments. So the conflict resolution body, as the name states it, is first of all to resolve the conflict. When there is conflict, it's surely between one or the other person, or one person and a body with involved. For me, for the argument to be made, the both sides need to be need to put their statements together, so that the conflict resolution body, in a very transparent way, can then make that discussion public with both parties. Because if there is a conflict, the resolution body is there to resolve it, and we might not end up resolving all of them, surely not, but at least then we have both intakes from both sides, and then we can speak with both of them, maybe trying to resolve the issue, or when it's not resolved, to say or to assess with both of the sides what we publish. And so I don't believe it must be as soon as it's received, because that can be very damaging for a reputation of a person. For example, if I state something that is that I believe is true, but maybe the conflict resolution body will even convince me that I'm on a wrong step, then again I do believe that we should be transparent, but not publishing it right away, but after having a discussion, because when there is a conflict, you need discussion and you need dialogue. And again, also the CRB, the conflict resolution body, is an elected body on which we entrust and put our trust upon. So let's also trust these guys. I believe they need to have a lot of first cases, a lot of feedback, so that we can see how their work is going, and then we can already reassess how it's going and how their work is being done.
Thank you, Dan. We have another pro argument for releasing the complaint straight away by, I believe, Michael from Sweden.
Not really, but I mean, I jump in because I think somebody else was missing, but I can, I'm happy to argue a bit on the other side as well.
Thanks, that's great.
I think we can ease Dan's fear a little bit by saying that, okay, we are going to publish straight away some sort of anonymized data, meaning that, okay, you know, there is a conflict between a member association and Volt Europa, and the nature of the conflict is A, B, C, whatever. It could be money, it could be copyright, could be whatever. Right. So what you're going to publish then is, as soon as you guys have received it, okay, there is conflict, member association versus Volt Europa, and then you state the nature of the conflict, and this is all you say in the beginning, and then it's going to be resolved internally. But then the movement knows that there is a conflict. And why I believe it is beneficial to do that is that, you know, if people are not, I mean, conflicts happen all the time, right? They are there all the time. And what I believe is detrimental if people don't see that there's a conflict is that, you know, as time goes on and on and on and on, you get this self-image of, you know, that everything is fine, kind of, you know, that we are a perfect organization, nothing is really happening here. And I think this is some sort of, you know, a little bit self-deceiving. And also, this is also creating the environment that, you know, if there's no conflict for a long time, if you create the self-image of we are perfect movement, but then there is suddenly a major conflict, you don't know how to deal with that. And this is a situation where everything falls apart because people will overreact. But if people are constantly aware that there is conflict, and that it is normal that there's conflict, and that there is no shame to talk about conflict, I think this is actually beneficial that we could publish this anonymized information about the nature of the conflict. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, really important remarks. Thank you, Michael. We have another contra-argument by Sophie from our co-president from the UK.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Sophie from the UK, and the following is just my personal opinion. It doesn't reflect what Volt UK thinks, just as a reminder. Yeah, so my argumentation goes as follows. So every request that is brought to the attention of the conflict resolution body should definitely be taken really seriously, because everyone involved should feel heard and also be heard. But however, the conflict resolution body, it should act in the interest of the entire organization. And that's why I believe that before the conflict resolution body moves forward in any direction, the complaint that is, that the body received should be scanned on 2 criteria, namely objectiveness and also truth seeking. And if those 2 criteria are fulfilled, then the conflict resolution body should accept the complaint and investigate this further. But publishing a complaint should only be considered in case of relevancy for Volt Europa as a whole organization. In particular, if the conflict resolution body believes that everyone involved should be reflecting and considering what the plaintiff, so the person that filed the complaint, has to say. Even when publishing, it should not be the complaint itself, but a description of the issue raised, and that's also what Michael just said. But not at the beginning when the complaint was being forwarded to the conflict resolution body, but after. And it should also be reworded. In any situation, the plaintiff should not fear for neither its position nor its reputation. At the same time, the defendant is innocent until proven guilty. Publishing a complaint too early, without proof and unfiltered, could damage the reputation without any reason, like Daniel just said. if, for example, both parties agree that a conflict could be easily solved if just a third party, the body, is involved, then there is no need to publish it. If it's resolved and they don't want to pour fuel into the fire. And hence, to ensure transparency, we have a similar proposal to what Michael just said, namely to publish a bi-yearly report of and analysis of the conflicts raised without involving any names. They could be filtered by levels, so European, national, local, by topic, so harassment, political alignment, misconduct, breach of values, and whether the conflict has been resolved or not. And yeah, and just as like a final remark, I think that conflicts are very different to each other, very, very different. And you shouldn't say that all conflict should be published immediately after, especially. The conflict resolution body should be involved not when it's already too late, but it should focus on its main task, which is resolving a conflict. And it shouldn't be doing only damage control. That's not what the body is for. So including the broad membership could seriously harm the process, and that sums up my argument for not publishing a complaint immediately when it gets in.
Thanks, Sophie. That's great. I think we've now heard quite a variety of opinion on such a complex topic. Is there anyone from the pro side who would like to react to the con speakers? Marcella.
I would like to react. Yes, I agree with Daniel, for instance, that timing is really important about this. But for instance, when there is coming a complaint and we are delaying transparency for understanding what is going on, it brings the weaker side, let's say, in more unfair position. So we need to really make sure that, of course, as long as there is any kind of analysis of the case, we don't need to reveal immediately everything. First, the case should be analyzed, but we should not delay unnecessarily too long to open a transparent process that all parties that are involved and people that might be potentially also involved, that have access to the information, that should be the right. And we should really promote transparency, because then it creates a possibility for, let's say, unwanted behavior, for information that can be hidden. And it should be always the last, let's say, way of trying to solve any kind of potential problems, because the dialogue should be the first. If there is any conflict, we should always try to talk together. And if necessary, we need to bring the European level, if it comes to national chapters or any kind of independent person involved or body that could help out first with a dialogue. And if that fails, we should have the next steps.
Thank you, Marcella. I overlooked Dan's hand, but if it's okay, I will let Sophie react and then take on Dan.
Thank you, Darlie. So what you just said is that the conflict resolution body should be the very, very last instance. But I disagree. I think that it sometimes helps a conflict if the conflict resolution body steps in, not when it's already too late and when a lot of arguments already have been made and the conflict has, come to a dimension where it wasn't necessary. So the conflict resolution body is actually a neutral body, and we have elected it to help us solve our internal conflicts. I don't think it harms a conflict if the conflict resolution body will be involved at an earlier stage. I mean, that's exactly the task, to resolve a conflict and not do damage control. And that's why I disagree that the conflict resolution body should be the last instance. And if a conflict goes on and the conflict resolution body is already involved, then of course the conflict resolution body can also decide to do a statement to all of its members to describe the conflict and put attention to the issue that has been discussed. But it shouldn't be the first thing to do.
Thank you, Sophie. Dan, please.
soon as they are received. As soon as they are received, it's not. I think we all agreed that some little bit of trust and confidentiality needs to be put out of when a request is received, because you will not publish A, B, C said this. You will publish there is this conflict that happened in that chapter and it concerns this. So the question truly is, as soon as it is received. No, I don't believe it should be published as soon as it is received. It should be vetted. It should be put into a process where we then make sure that the confidentiality of the people that are involved is respected, and also made sure that the resolution body can actually come to a resolution. Because and I do fully agree with Michael that it is important to have arguments. It is important to have an informal debate when things are not going well, an informal debate, yeah, it creates strength in the movement if we can criticize each other, but we should never forget that critic should be always constructive and never destructive, because otherwise it doesn't bring anything to the debate.
Thank you, Dan. So we will now move to the audience remarks.
Yes, thank you so far for this lively debate. We've received a couple of statements. The first one is a rather general one, so it's neither pro nor con, and it comes from Claudio Lanza in Italy. And he says, let's remind ourselves that in any conflict, transparency projects protects the weaker side, the one filing the complaint, subject of the unwanted behavior. At the same time, transparency is an insurance for those who complaint are treated fairly. Delays in transparency leaves the weaker side in a position of weakness, the more powerful in the position of unfair advantage. Ultimately, without transparency, there is no chance for a fair dialogue. That was our first statement, and we've got a second one that comes from Julia.
Yes, thank you very much. So the second one is a statement against the statement on that we're discussing now, and it's from George Penn, Luxembourg, and he says, I don't see why we should make conflict resolution public. These things must be kept confidential, and bringing it to a wider forum could risk adding unnecessary fuel to the fire. People need to feel comfortable to talk, discuss, and share the feelings. The key is that conversations and dialogue take place, and making it public makes this less likely, and therefore it's less likely the conflict is going to be resolved. Healthy conflict and disagreement is needed in a political party. But by the time it reaches the conflict resolution body, it's gone beyond healthy conflict. There is also another statement, a general statement, which I'm going to handle to Katharina.
Yes, thank you. There is more comments actually coming in. Among others, have a general statement, again, from Claudio Lanza in Italy. And he probably just wants to follow up on the statement. He says, about the timing of transparency of the complaint, when the complaint is accepted, it must be released. To be accepted, a complaint should not have been analyzed thoroughly by the pertinent body. So much for that one. Then back to Julia, because I think we've got at least one more.
Yes, exactly. So we have another comment from Charles Evan from France. And he says, publishing a complaint as soon as it is received risks involving bystanders into the conflict, that by making it harder for the CRB to arbitrate and making it harder for both parties to find a reconciliation as the public takes side. So this is a statement against the current proposition. There is one final statement, I believe, that just came in, and so I'm handing it over to Katharina.
Actually, I think we don't have any further statements. So there is just one very brief remark from Elske Uitrix, sorry for mispronouncing that name, in the Netherlands, and it goes, personally, I support the vision suggestion made by Sophie about the way conflicts should be handled wholeheartedly. And that's it so far.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for all your input and insight. I think it's something that you can actually discuss for several hours. So perhaps we managed to get at least a few very good arguments on the table within this short amount of time. To perhaps come to a few conclusions or see where we seem to have reached kind of an agreement and areas where opinions still diverge, I will try and make an attempt to summarize this debate. So I think where most people seem to agree is that the nature of the conflict matters. So it matters because depending on the nature of the conflict, it should be handled in a certain way, and also in terms of its communication. So the nature of the conflict, some people think that only the nature of the conflict, if it arises, should be communicated, while others believe that the concrete description should be delivered of what the conflict regards. Then we have a really interesting argument with regards to the normalization of conflict. So really acknowledging that conflict is very much part of any organization, and probably particularly of a political one, and not seeing this as something to be scared of, but simply saying this is part of our everyday life. And by doing that, not sweeping it under the carpet, but really creating an environment where conflict is tackled in a proactive and constructive way. And I think that's a really important and interesting point for me personally, because I think when we talk about conflict, we probably very fast also get into debate on discrimination, stigmatization, and so on. And also here, I believe it is absolutely key that we do not simply believe that, or we do not simply sweep such occurrences under the carpet, but we talk openly about it and really thereby want to tackle it instead of just sweeping over it. I think what became clear as well is that the definition of transparency and accountability on this topic is key. As discussed in the debate before, I think some people have the idea that transparency means providing information at all times to everyone. But I think here what is quite interesting is that obviously the nature of conflict, as some pointed out, matters, and some things, even if you describe them, have a nature of interpersonal and feeling and emotional. And even if you potentially publish a whole conflict, it does not grasp the entirety of or the complexity of the nature of the conflict, which might actually then feed into information asymmetry and kind of perhaps create a wrong perception even of the conflict. So I think there is also a little bit the argument between integrity of the people that the conflict regards and the integrity of potentially our organization. And then very lastly, from our audience, I think there were some interesting remarks on transparency protects the weaker side. So the complainee as such, if a conflict is straight away published. And I think here I would also go back to some arguments that were made, in that if that is done, then it's a question of whether it protects or whether it also feeds into the assumption of straight away saying that the person that the complaint is aimed at is actually already claimed as being guilty, or his or her behavior as being unwanted. So really interesting discussion, good foundation to be continued. And what Volt is doing to openly actually create a nature of where conflict arises as a normality, but is tackled in a constructive manner. That our initiative will be presented by Anouk, but I will now hand the chairing back to Tor, who will continue. So thanks everyone who engaged in the discussion.
Thank you, Valerie. Thank you all participants as well. What a lively debate. I just want to remind everyone that we still have 25 minutes before the vote closes. We had a big support at the GA for the country council. And of course, we need to vote today to make sure whether or not we still have that support. I hope we still have it. Please go in and vote. You have 25 minutes. The vote will close at 1 o'clock. We might even go above time, 5 or 10 minutes on the debate part, but the vote will close at 1 o'clock. And before then, I would like to hand over to Anouk, who will present to us about the integrity system.
Thank you, Thor. Welcome to everyone at our extraordinary General Assembly. My name is Anouk Ooms. I am one of the General Secretaries, together with Leonard, who you saw at the beginning of this meeting, explaining about the vote of today. I'm very happy to share with you, after this lively debate, all about our integrity system. And I will share a presentation about that. Let me open it quickly. Wait. Sorry. Sorry for that. So I wanted to share with you the integrity system that we're setting up, because currently we have our conflict resolution body in place, which was appointed at the General Assembly of Sofia. And the conflict resolution body is really aiming at solving and resolving conflicts, but they will do so in a legal matter and really as a ruling. And so with that, we found a need, as we are growing and as we are debating and professionalizing, that it's important to have like an entry point which doesn't necessarily straight go into conflict, because at the end of the day, what we want to do is to avoid conflicts to arise. And with that, I'm working hard with the CRB and other stakeholders to set up an integrity system. So I would really love to share that today with all of you. And it will also be shared in the wrap up of this GA. And I'm open to all questions during this presentation and after. So what I want to say is that the goal is to set up an integrity system which is twofold. One of them is the enforcement part, because if unwanted behavior is happening, it is important that it is discussed and punished where necessary, but eventually that we prevent unwanted behavior happening. And I want to say that in general, I firmly believe that people do not set out to harm each other or intentionally hurt each other. And with that, unwanted behavior most of the time comes from misunderstanding or being upset or feeling yourself misunderstood. And I think we should really focus on making sure that conflicts do not reach a level that it needs an official ruling, but that they can be solved as much as possible. But with that, we need to have an enforcement of unwanted behavior, but most especially aimed at preventing that behavior to continue. And I will explain later on, it will have two systems, which is both repressive and otherwise preventive. And the second part that we will set up is the moral learning. And today's debate is a perfect example of how that would work, because we have different values that are important to us: confidentiality versus transparency, being effective versus transparent, moving together or sometimes move on your own. So it's important that we have these debates on every level within Volt to really make sure that people understand how we come to our decisions, and that they can be challenged, and that we can see how to become as fair and just as possible. So the enforcement process, basically, if you look at unwanted behavior, there are three big categories that you can see, and it is an abuse of power, which has all to do with corruption, a conflict of interest, a breach of confidentiality, or gross negligence. Financial abuse has to do with fraud, with theft, with misuse of available means, things like that we can all imagine. And then personal abuse, where it comes down to discrimination, intimidation, sexual harassment, or violence. All of that we obviously want to avoid. And when it comes to this unwanted behavior, it is important that we have a foundation to define together what is really the unwanted behavior. And to do so, we will have a code of conduct and a code of ethics. We will have several harassment protocols. And eventually, when it comes to official rulings from our CRB, it will also have case law, which shows how the CRB came to that ruling and why, so we can all learn from that. So the goal is to, we eventually will have to punish at some point, but it's most important that we avoid punishment as much as possible, to have a debate and to solve conflicts and to prevent all of us to behave in an unwanted way. So once this system is set in place, we will have in the core, you will find the integrity coordinator, which at this point I was appointed by the board to do, but with the pure aim of setting it up right now, and when the structure is there, to hand over to someone when we will have a call for that, because we feel it's important that everyone who is part of this integrity system can be as impartial and not conflicted with any other things that are in the organization as possible. So the integrity coordinator will be the one who will be connecting all the dots. And but an important part that we'll start is to set up and identify confidential counselors. So confidential counselors is where you first enter if you have a complaint of any sort. And they will be there to listen to you and to really advise you on what to do. And that advice could be to make a formal complaint, could also be just to help you on how can you go back to the person you felt a complaint from and discuss it, or guide you on writing a proper email to be constructive. That's a role that a confidential counselor would have. And a confidential counselor is a bit comparable to an ombudsman. So it's someone there, and everything that's discussed there, it will be confidential. And now you will see a line to the integrity coordinator, and that will be just to support the confidential counselors, but on an overall level, not on a personal level, until someone really makes a formal complaint. So then you reach the integrity coordinator, and the integrity coordinator will research if it is a complaint that really needs to go to the conflict resolution body to make a ruling of. If mediation is an option, and mediation would mean that the person accusing someone and the person being accused will have someone to guide them into a debate to see if they can find a mutual solution. If mediation is not an option, the conflict resolution body could be an option, or if it's not really a breach of integrity, but it needs the board to say something about it, would be that the integrity coordinator would make advice and send it to the European board to advise and to rule on. So this is a system where it comes down to repressive and preventive behavior, but that's just the first part. The second part is the moral learning process, which I already said we did most of today. And it is about having discussions and debates in an open way where we can learn, so that we can come up with a working definition together on what is justice and how do we make fair and just decisions. And it's also aimed at, sometimes things happen without us intending it, so the outcome is not what we intended. So it is important to create a place where we can share thoughts and see, what did I do to cause this effect, and did I do that effectively, and how could I do it better next time? So these moral deliberations we will set up on a European level, but we'll also hope to trickle down to all the national chapters, because this is the way where we can really make sure that we have an open dialogue together, and that we can learn and grow as persons and as an organization. Then apart from that, so this is all about deliberations and making fair decisions. We will also, based on that, we'll have some case law, which will help us to not only have discussions, but also to really be able to look back on what was discussed, what was agreed. So most important part of that is our mission and vision that we agreed on during our last GA, and the core values. So we'll still be working on the core values to really make them very known to everyone. How does it work? Part of it will be the code of conduct and ethics, and it will be setting up guiding principles and when is transparency more important versus confidentiality? How do we deal with data protection? How do we deal with speediness versus alignment? Things like that. And then we will come up to core dilemmas where we will always have friction. So both values are equally as important, but what do we do? So we will make sure that this is all more and more shared with our movement, so everyone can see and learn from it. How did we come up to our decisions? And at the end of the day, nobody's perfect, so this will be the perfect place for all of us to learn and to develop as an organization. So then I lastly wanted to share with you the timeline. We will start with setting up this system, and the foundation will be the code of conduct and the code of ethics. So that will be the first part that we're setting up. After that, we will set up a call for confidential counselors, and we'll organize the background, which would be a place in workplace where you can reach out to, an email that you can reach out to that is confidential, all those things to be ready when this could be shared. After June, in July, we will set up we will share the code of conduct and the code of ethics for input and feedback from our VCR, which hopefully after today, with the amendments of our statutes, will become the country council. And we will set up Q&As with our members, and eventually, if we will have a general assembly in September, we want to present it so all members can approve it. And from there, we can start with implementation. And by that time, the whole system will be ready. And then I will step down as the current integrity coordinator and really appoint someone that we can train and can guide to do this in the best way possible. Which means that in case there's something going on right now that you want to share, please feel free to reach out to me so I can help you and advise you and see how we can tackle whatever problem is there. And towards September, when everything is formal organized, we will have an appointment of the integrity coordinator, which would be someone who would not be within the organization. It will be a member, but not within organizations such as I am or the board is, or any of our functional teams and political teams. And then last phase where we will enter. So first of all, the repressive and preventive side, and then we will shift to the moral learning, because then we will start organizing talks and debates together and train all stakeholders to guide these talks so that together we can grow and learn from all the debates that we have. So that would be all that I wanted to share with you today. It will also be shared formally in the wrap up. And in case you have any questions, always feel free to reach out to me. And now I would want to ask our chair and co-chairs if there are questions that I can answer that came in.
Yes, thank you, Anouk. There actually are questions coming in this very minute, and I'll just give you the first one. This one comes from Jutta Christen in Germany, and she asks, in our system, who finally decides if a case goes to the conflict resolution body? And is the coordinator appointed by the board or voted by the members?
Currently, I was voted upon it by the board because we want to really set it up. But eventually, I'm not sure how we should do this. I will look up for it, but I think it would be something that the board could give an advice on and then eventually have approved by the members, because I think it is as equally as important as the conflict resolution body that this is really dealt with all the movement and all the members involved.
Okay, there is a comment actually, which is kind of related to what we are discussing, even though not really focused on the question. It asks, it is from Joe van Weinsberg. I'm sorry if I mispronounced it. So how about the status of the ethical committee at the European level? Independent, sitting period at least 5 years. So I think he's asking about a status updating.
Can you repeat the last part because I didn't really fully understand?
Yes, so it's about the status of the ethical committee. And then he adds, for example, if there are going to be an independent status, the sitting period of the members. So if there are thoughts about how it is going to be structured, I believe that is the question.
Yeah, so currently we have appointed and members have approved the conflict resolution body. I'm setting all of this up in close relation with them and to really see what is the legal part that they are doing and what is missing and how can we organize that so that we can really create a safe haven for our members. But we will eventually have this being independent from our organization, so it is clear that it has no conflict of interest in any way. So that's the structure that we're looking at right now, but it will also be available for everyone who wants to give input to please share and reach out to me so we can make this work as best as possible. And that's really the phase that we are currently in, to set up the structure, and hopefully by July, August, we will have this in such a way that we can present it to our members on the hopefully next GA in September.
Thank you very much, Anouk. I think we will move on, but I first wanted to remind everybody that there are still 10 minutes left to vote. If you have not voted, then please go and vote. If you don't know how to vote, then please find your personal voting link in your email. With that, I think we'll move on to Marlies Steinhauser and Alexander Haver, co-presidents of Austria, who both have exciting news. Marlies?
Yes.
Hi.
Hi, guys. Thank you very much for having us and for letting us be here. We're actually quite a little outside Vienna in the wine gardens, but we're always with one eye on this yet amazing digital General Assembly. And what we, I think, really want to say and stress out is thank you for giving us this opportunity, for being here with you, and why we are so thankful and why this is so important for us. Marlies actually will tell you.
So as many of you know, in Vienna, the election will take place in October, and we are really, really convinced that this is not just a big opportunity for us here in Vienna and in Austria, but for the whole European party. And I think, why is this so? So Vienna is the 5th biggest city in the EU, and it is also the bridge between East and West. And the most important thing is, it is one of the most international places in Central Europe. So establishing Volt here in Vienna will be one of the biggest boosts we can get, I think, for the whole party.
I think so as well. And so if you have, I would say, if you have any friends or family or acquaintances or contacts, just contacts in Vienna, just please let them know and send them this contact that should be written right now down here in the field, in the screen. It should be Richard Knoll at volteuropa.org, who is our mobilizing coordinator for the elections. I'm not sure if it's already within the screen. Otherwise, you will also get an email text from us after the General Assembly. So just please tell everyone who you might know in Vienna to reach out for us. And if you for yourself have any spare time or any capacity left, yeah, come visit us in the, in my opinion, most beautiful city in the world. And we would really, really love to welcome as many of you as possible. Let's make this city purple, and let's just make this a huge success for all of us. We are so excited for this election, and we were so excited and looking forward to seeing you here. Thank you for this amazing GA and for letting us be part of it. Have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful GA. Vote, and we'll see each other in Vienna. Bye-bye.
Thank you both. Very exciting. We will move on to Valerie and Rainier for closing remarks. And let me just remind you first, we still have 6 minutes where you could vote. But Valerie, you're next.
Thank you, Tor. 6 minutes, all right. So I think it will be you saying something about the outcome of the vote. So before I entered this breakout room here and can speak again to you, we were just saying how long ago it is that we actually met in person within Volt. So it's probably around 3 months now that we have seen each other, which can be quite an a challenge in terms of also motivating ourselves, perhaps. And there's a lot of time to reflect and perhaps a little bit change our lives and do things that we usually don't find time for. But I think it is also quite a challenge to not see each other and really engage personally and interact together. So that this event and also our last online GA happened in the way it did is really a big success and means a lot. So this is why, first of all, I would like to use the time to thank all the teams that made today a success again. We are a volunteer organization and make these events happen on a zero budget. So you really can imagine how much commitment and energy our volunteers are contributing next to their normal jobs and their very busy lives to make this organization run. And this is exactly the reason, or first of all, it is truly humbling for me to experience such devotion to our shared purpose. And it is really the reason that where I take the energy from all this positive energy and commitment around me to put also energy into this project every single day and fight for a better Europe, a better that is fair and just and inclusive. So thank you everyone who does make Volt a reality every single day. On the organizational side, we really aim to improve based on your feedback and input, and we are trying to improve our culture of feedback, and where every criticism, as long as it's constructive, is very welcome. And we have asked you after our last online GA for feedback, and you have provided plenty. So that is fantastic. In general, 2/3 of people gave us the feedback that they rated the General Assembly and the organization as very good or excellent, which we can, I think, be very proud of. But we, of course, don't want to stop here. But keep going. And you also gave us a lot of advice of what we can do better this and the next time. And amongst other, you said we should improve our communication and explanation of the votes, but also around the General Assembly in general. You said we should improve our technical overview of the votes and documentation of it. And you said we should improve or change our method of counting votes. So these are just a few out of many very insightful and important feedback points for us. And we will aim to tackle all of these and and use your advice. Some of it we have already, like the last point. So we have already established a task force that will dive into the methods of voting, so we can improve the next time. On the political side, we have just heard from Marlies and Alex, our co-presidents of Volt Austria, why the Vienna elections are so important for us and why we as European movement that acts across borders need to support each other and act together. So I really hope that a lot of teams, a lot of neighboring country teams, but maybe even from further away, will make the effort and support our teams on the ground. Maybe even other teams that are running, such as in Germany. But this is really what Volt is about and why we can make a big difference in European interaction and communication and collaboration. But also, as a political newcomer, a lot of our success or failure does not only depend on ourselves very often, but especially on external factors, such as the political climate, electoral hurdles, the public political discourse. And so patience and the awaiting of opportunities to find the right timing for our action is a big part to really turn opportunity into success. And so we need to await times when we think, okay, now it is really time to make our voice heard and to collect our resources and really act together to create a Europe that tackles its shared challenges together. And one of these opportunities to really stand up, make our voice heard and act together, I believe is very much right now. And I will tell you why. So the current corona crisis has really been a challenge for Europe, and it has shown that the political and public discourse has been polarizing. So some people say we need to go alone, we need to do this by ourselves, and others say we will not survive and we will not get out of this crisis in a decent manner if we don't act together. And so the corona crisis has shown to us that decisions need to be made, and especially with regards to European integration. So that would be point number one. And because the corona crisis is such a has been or is such a challenge for Europe, the Commission has also proposed or come forward with extremely important proposals on the European recovery, which go much deeper into the functioning of the European Union and also on our distribution of money and how we act together as Europeans. So all of these proposals will come up in the next months. And I will go into a second why it depends on us to make a difference here. The Conference of Europe is coming up. So this is another European initiative. The European Commission has initiated this conference where the Commission aims to really in dialogue with the citizens to come up with improvements also for the European Union, to understand better the perception of the European Union. These are two European initiatives, and all of these things, such as the proposal of how we should act together as a union in terms of fiscal measures to get out of this crisis, but also after our last crisis, the migration crisis, the Commission has now prepared a proposal on how to reform our migration system. So all of these things come on the table at a time when Germany will take the presidency of the European Council. Let's go a second into what that means. So the European Council, I believe you all know, is the body where all of our heads of state and governments come together to make actually usually be part of the most important decisions that are being made at the European level. And that is really important because a lot of the times the Commission or proposals are being brought forward that are in the best interest of the European Union as a whole and for the European citizens as a community. But when they are brought within this body, the haggling of national interests start. So Germany, or perhaps let's take the last example, Austria and Denmark and Sweden and the Netherlands are really like, no, we cannot support the last proposal of the European Commission because it hurts our countries financially. And others say, well, we need this, we need the money also from other countries because this is the only way to survive this crisis. And I believe that this is kind of a wrong way to look at it, because if we only take our national benefits and shortcomings out of such proposals, then we will always fail to see that a lot of benefit comes out of being a community. And so this community needs to be protected, because especially as Germans, speaking now as a German, we have a lot of benefit from being a community, from being part of a community, and so we need to behave like that. I think a lot of momentum right now is also there for us at this very moment, because there is an increased awareness and attention on the lack of inclusivity, fairness, and justice in Europe after the killing of George. It is very much on the on our everyday news, and our everyday awareness and perhaps sensitivity is more there, that systemic discrimination and stigmatization is an everyday reality also in Europe. So as a political, I think that all the external factors make us a relevant political actor to really speak up with a unified voice across borders everywhere in Europe, and have the same demands. So with regards to the last point, I think if we apply it to the European level and look at discrimination and where we can show a more humane face to the world as Europe is the reform of our European migration system. This proposal is going to come up now from the European Commission within the next months, and it will go through the European Council. So as just explained, all the national heads of state and government will have a say and can potentially veto or block or change important parts of this proposal. And I think here it is our responsibility as Volt to really step up and say we need a fair and we need a humane migration system where everyone sees themselves as part of the solution. So I think here our message needs to be unified everywhere in Europe. No more men should drown in the Mediterranean, and we need to make that happen. The other part is the Corona crisis. So our economies are suffering big time, and the proposal of the Commission and how to tackle this is called Next Generation EU, and it will it could potentially beef up the European Union with a lot more financial power in helping us citizens and municipalities to overcome this crisis together in a better way. So also here, in the end, it's our national heads of government that will make the decision on whether this will happen or not. I think we as Volt need to provide a roadmap to a fiscal union and explain to everyone why this is important to act together. We should also see this crisis as a chance and to get out of this crisis in a strengthened manner, stronger and with vision. And this vision should go into a green and digital future. So make clear that every economic recovery program that we start together should be in light of a green and digital future. And the last part is I do believe we should really pressure our national governments, our national public discourse into we need a coordinated European exit plan. So all the coordination that hasn't happened in the past on European border checks, on how measures are implemented, on lockdowns and so on, I think we can do much better here and really say, okay, let's do this together. Let's see what makes sense. Obviously have regional differences and acknowledge the different situations across countries, but say a few measures work everywhere, such as testing that hasn't actually been implemented or really been driven forward anywhere in Europe. So let's have a voice here and let's take on this responsibility, use the opportunity right now where the discourse is shifting and we really can position Volt as a very progressive, a very European political actor. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. And thank you, everybody, because you have been very active in voting. Before we get to the voting results, I'll just politely remind everyone that we have a new policy framework and process, and we have just announced the first round of policy drafting. So you will all be voting on September 5 for our next sets of policies. Voting on September 5. And speaking of voting, we have results. The results of today's vote will be officially announced on Monday, but we can already share the preliminary results for the 4 different votes you had. And to be a little bit specific, the first vote was, do you approve the proposed amendment of Article 21, internal regulations of the statutes, as you can find on page 10 of the supporting document? We had a 97.38% approval. So more than 97% said yes. And for the second vote, do you approve the proposed amendment of Article 22, Country Council of the statutes, as you can find on page 11 and 12 of the supporting document? The results were also 97.11%. So again, more than 97% in favor. Lastly, the last 2 votes, do you approve the proposed new article for the Country Council in the internal regulations, as you can find on page 13 plus 14. The results were 96.23% in favor, so more than 96%. The very last vote, do you approve the proposed adjustment of invalid references for the country council in the internal regulations, as you can find on page 15 of the supporting document? The vote was 96.82% in favor, more than 96%. With that, I think we can say that we have had a very successful extraordinary GA, where we confirmed the votes that we had from the General Assembly some weeks prior. I would like to ask Katerina and Julia if we have any remaining outstanding items before we wrap up. Katerina, Julia, do we have any comments? Do we have any practicalities that are not closed yet? I see thumbs up. I see smiling faces. With that, and with the voting results in, and a reminder that the official votes will be shared on Monday, I would like to thank everybody for participating today, and particularly for voting. I would like to bring everyone on stage who is still on the Zoom call. Turn on your cameras, wave, say hi, because this is the point in time where we officially close the General Assembly.
Thank you, Thor. Thanks everybody for participating.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ciao.
Thank you.